Hello, in this video we will take a look on font sizes, how to use the space optimally, and we will look at how to set the line and letter spacing correctly. We have few font size rules. First one, and very important one, is that as a default we should have only one font size in the slide unless client has for some reason different rule mentioned in the guideline. Maximum you can do two font sizes in some very specific situations if it benefits slide for some reason, but then discuss this with your admin. Second rule is that we should never go under font size of 9 or 10 points, and we should strive for optimal font size, which is usually around 12 pp or more. It is usually mentioned in the client's guidelines, so refer to that. But what if there is just too much content and you really can just fulfill this rule? So in that case, if you are admin, if you notice this issue right away, ask the client if we can do one of the below solutions. First one is that we could extend the slide frame area and use more of the white space. Second option might be splitting the slide into two or more slides if necessary. And usually client chooses from one of these options, but if client writes that it's okay to go with font size that is below 10 or 9 points, then it is okay, because sometimes maybe they do not present the presentation to audience, but they just print it out. But we need to have it confirmed to continue that way. If you notice this issue in later stage, then we should try to provide an option with a readable font size. So in that case, refer to these 2 points, either with the slide frame or splitting the slides. If you are a specialist and you notice that you will need to go below the mentioned font sizes, then please inform your admin and ask what should be the solution for such a slide. We pay a lot of attention to small font sizes because that is a more frequent issue, but sometimes the issue is also overly big font size. Content text should not be bigger than the main title of the slide, so we keep the hierarchy of the slide elements. And let's look on a few examples that shows bad practice. So in this case, we can see that the content text is bigger than the main title. So it doesn't look very good because it looks a bit too forced, and also it doesn't support the message of that title is the main message of the slide. So let's not do this. And in here we have second example where the bulleted text is bigger than the heading. So first of all, we break the rule about only one font size in the slide. And also, again, we do not support the hierarchy of the elements. So this is also wrong way to do it. So how to achieve the optimal font size in the slide and what are the techniques we can use? We should always think about the optimal structure of the slide. So try to use the slide frame space smartly and then think about the message of the slide. We should always support the message of the slide. So it should not get lost in some kind of organization of the boxes because of the optimal font size. And we should also keep the hierarchy of the element in the structure. It's not always possible to keep the same size of boxes. So here we have example where boxes are the same sizes, they are the same height and same width, but this might not be the optimal structure because of few things. So first of all, we have a heading font bigger than the rest of the table. And then the space is not used very smartly because we have quite big space for the heading, and then in some cells we have totally unused space, whether in another ones the text is rather cramped, and we also had to decrease the line spacing, which is not the most optimal way to do it since we have still so much space. So let's take a look on what we could do in this example. So in here, as you can see, we decreased the space for the heading, and we keep somewhat the consistency in the table because all the three columns have the same width, but they differ a bit more in the height, so they are a bit more customized. So for the boxes with a lot of content, we increased the height of the box, and now we've been able to fit text comfortably, and we didn't have to decrease the line spacing. We still keep some consistency also in the height because the second and fourth row are the same size, and the first and third are again the same size. So this would be a very good solution. And we also now have only one font size in the whole table. Many times we can also see structure like this, where we have a lot of bullet points, each in separate box, and they are just stretched out throughout the slide frame. This is also not the optimal structure because we have a lot of unused space in these boxes that doesn't have that much content, and then only in few that have more content the space is somewhat used. And usually just because we have few boxes with 2 or 3 lines, then we have to go quite low with the font size. So much better solution would be splitting boxes into 2 columns, and we already reached the 2 points with the font size than in previous slide, and the space looks much more equally used, and we use the white space more efficiently. What could we do in this case to improve the usage of the space? So as you can see in here, the first issue is that we give quite a lot of space to this side heading, which doesn't require actually a lot of space. And then we have rather small font size in the rest of the text. So always you can think first about the type of the heading that fits better. So we could go maybe for the heading on the top, or we could use the heading on the side. So this is something you can always consider to try, and it can help to reach better font size in many cases. Then in case like this, where we have a lot of content just in the one of the boxes, we can do setting of 2 columns for the text for the heaviest section. So as you can see in this top box, this sets 2 columns. You can find this setting in here. So you can choose 1, 2, or 3 columns. So you can see if I would choose only one column setting, I would not fit this text into this shape. But since I went for 2, it fits just fine. So this can help in many situations to optimize the font size. Another solution can be splitting the structure into 2 columns. Please just note that you do not have to keep the ratio kind of 50-50 on the left and right side. You can kind of blow up the most heavy box on one side and then give the rest of the space for less heavier boxes. And we should also make sure that in this case one side doesn't look more important than others, because still all of these boxes are equally important. Now to the icons. So icons have also their connection to font size. Many times we should question the size of the icon, because sometimes big icons stand in the way to bigger font size. Sometimes also we have many icons. The number of the icon is used in one slide, where again we have almost more icons than the text, And we should also think about how much value icons bring in such a case, because icons should always support the message, but they are not more important than the text itself. So just to mention few best practice examples, for example, having icons in the very heavy content tables, where icon gets so small that we even can't see what it is. Maybe we should just consider to delete it. Or another example could be icon for each of the bullet points when there is 20 bullet points in the slide. So then the icons just kind of add into the chaos, and we should in that case maybe consider having rather nice structure than plenty of icons. We will go to look on the line spacing setting and letter spacing setting, but before I would just like to recap some main settings for correctly set box, because that is just the best way how to start with correctly set box. So we should always make sure that the box is set to do not autofit. So when we do some edits to the box, it doesn't resize automatically. Then we should set correct margins according to client guidelines. And then we should always have text wrapped inside of the shape. And now we can take a look on the line spacing. So in case of too heavy content, you are very welcome to decrease the spacing in this section to 0 pt. Usually clients have mentioned in guidelines how much the spacing should be. Sometimes it's 6 or different, but in case we have heavy content, you are welcome to just decrease it down to 0 in both cases, before and after. This setting for line spacing to be smaller than single, we can use, but in very rare cases when we try to reach either optimal or minimum font size, and it's not possible in any other way because there is just too much text. Then we can reach out to this setting, but we have to be very careful. The text needs to still have enough space and should not look super cramped, and in no case the letters should be overlapping. So be very careful with this setting and maybe inform your admin if you reach for this. And by default, we should always use the single line spacing. Then there is a setting for character/letter spacing, which is not allowed in any case for us. So it is this setting where you can set the letter spacing to either tight, normal, loose, very loose, or similar. So basically all of these settings are banned to use, and only this one is allowed, so it should be the normal, which is correct. And if you would ever use this setting to more tight or very tight for some very specific case, you really need to inform your admin in this case, and you have to state why you use this setting, because it is really not allowed. Just to show you what this setting really does is, now you can see that it is set into type. So if you set to very tight, then it's basically unreadable. Or opposite, then if it's loose, the letters are getting very far apart. Here we have a table which is very content heavy, and client has minimal font size 10, and I can't achieve it even though I tried my best. So what could I do? So I will try to adjust this slide as I go to show you what are the options we have. So as you can see, this is very heavy content table, and even though I try to push it to the slide frame, it just doesn't allow me. So, should I reach for smaller font size? No, not yet. There are a few things we can do to help achieve a better font size. First thing in this case would be that I would check if this table doesn't have any extra enters, which many times happens because they kind of keep us from using space. So for example, in here you can see that there is extra enter where there is nothing written. So if I delete this one, automatically I get a bit more space because then the cell doesn't have to be bigger just because of that enter. So that's first step. Now I would always check if I actually have to keep the bullet points because sometimes the table has just one bullet for each cell, but we keep the bullet point, but it's not necessary in that case. But in my table, there are sometimes two bullet points, so I will keep bullet points just for the consistency. So now what I can check is the bullet point indent. In this case, it's 0.65 handing and the same in here. So when the text is small and we have heavy content in the table, you can see that the indents take actually quite a lot of space. So what we can do is slightly decrease it, even though we are breaking a rule of the client guidelines. But in this case, we can inform the client and rather get the better font size than keeping all the rules. So in this case, I will try to make it smaller to 0.5, and that gives me a bit more space. I still can't fit the table to the slide frame, so I will try to adjust the text box margins. Client has quite big text box margin on left and right, so I will slightly decrease it also on the top and right. So again, this gave me a bit more space. And the last change that I have now is to break actual line spacing. So it's already set for 0 and 0 in here. So in this case, I would go for line spacing multiple, and I will try to adjust it to 0.95. And again, it already helped me a bit, but still not enough. So I will adjust it to 0.9, and in this case it helped fully, and now I can adjust the table into the slide frame. I could keep the minimum font size of 10, and I broke few rules which I will definitely mention to my admin that then will wrap it up to the client. So just place in the corner yellow sticker and mention to your admin the rules that you broke in order to be able to keep the minimum font size for the client, and it is alright. When you are going for this option of adjusting few guidelines rules, try to break as few rules as possible. So maybe in this case I broke all the 3 rules of bullet point, indents, text box margins, and the line spacing. So maybe if I would just go first for the line spacing, I would not need to break the other rules. So here is just a recap of this section. So always check the unnecessary enter spacing, check if we need to keep the bullet points, if there is just one bullet point for each cell, reduce bullet point indentation, reduce text box margins, and you can decrease slightly the line spacing, but text should never overlap and also should not look too cramped. Thank you very much for your attention.